Welcome to the Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy, the free podcast for motivated teachers and school leaders who want to inspire their students and school community in literacy learning. Make sure you subscribe to the show on your favourite podcast player, and for more amazing literacy resources, check out the show notes provided with every episode.
Hi, I'm Sharon and I'm the host of A Teacher's Toolkit for Literacy. In every Toolkit episode, we bring you specific resources, tools, strategies, tips, techniques to help you on your job as a teacher of literacy. Firstly, we acknowledge and pay our respects to the Kaurna people, the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands we gather on. We acknowledge the deep feelings of attachment and relationship of the Kaurna people to country, and we respect and value their past, present and ongoing connection to the land and cultural beliefs. Welcome newcomers to the Facebook group, to podcasts and our Teachific resources. We love hearing the diverse reasons why teachers across the world are joining. So much deep and creative and thoughtful literacy work going on in schools. A few recent comments, all from teachers, for joining and listening to podcast ideas and professional growth. I'm a second year teacher and would love to improve my literacy pedagogical practices, to keep up to date in current research and learn about resources and tools to use, sharing and collaborating, and ideas for teaching. So if you're not a member of the Teachers Facebook group, we'd love you to join and introduce yourself to the group. But now to this podcast. This one is called Latest Release Books for F to 6 students. And we welcome back to this podcast Genevieve Kruyssen, who is from Where the Wild Things Are bookshop in Brisbane. Welcome, Genevieve.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So good to have you back. We had you maybe about a year ago where we were talking about ranges of books. Not necessarily latest releases on that day, but this time we have, there's always latest releases. There's huge numbers of books released on a monthly basis.
Oh yeah, there's so much stock coming out all the time and so many good Australian books coming out all the time, which is wonderful.
Yes, yeah. So we've asked you to curate a list of, or a collection of books today, and they represent, latest releases, and I'm taking it that, does latest release mean that they've come out in the last month or in the last quarter? Or
have been a little generous with some of my latest release claims.
Yes.
But most of them, let's say about half of these have come out in the last 2 or 3 months. Right. And then some of them are more like within the last year that perhaps were books that I like their connection with each other.
Beautiful. You are a valuable person in my armoury as a teacher, because I think there is something so, I'm just going to say exciting, about thinking about what books are new that we can bring to our students, whether we bring them as recommendations for a book that they can read or whether we bring them to our students as read-alouds. And it's that area that I'm really hoping people can really feel that today is a little bit of some real tips and tricks and techniques coming to them today about getting some insight into some of these latest releases, and maybe bring to your students a book or some books that you might not have actually thought of bringing to your students before, and be intrigued enough to chase up one or more of these books, to think about having a read of it and enjoying it, and then bring it to your students in the classroom. So that's a long preamble from me about the importance of I suppose, keeping ourselves up to date with books that are around and giving ourselves some time to think about what we might like to read, because once we read it, we're going to be able to do much better delivery and thinking about that book with our students. So I think that's one of the key things that is the reason for today's topic, is about finding great read-alouds. And
I think with that, just as a little sneak in, I think that's where it's about finding the books that are those books that are for everyone, right?
Yeah.
The books that are written beautifully and have amazing vocab, but what doesn't have to be advanced vocab, but just have the precise vocab that suits their story perfectly so that our teachers can enjoy reading them just as much as the kids.
Absolutely. And that's such an important point, Genevieve, because when we talk about, I think one of our teaching struggles, which we sometimes introduce the podcast with, one is finding what are we going to read aloud? But then sometimes we can underestimate the power of reading aloud, because if we really are reading things where we can have incredible author craft and, write a voice in there.
There are books that just demand to be read aloud, like those ones with the delicious words that just want to form themselves in your mouth.
Yes. And
if you enjoy it, how can your students not enjoy listening to it?
Yes, yeah. And some of the books today, Genevieve, we might even tantalise people a little bit by reading just a first line or so from some of them, because there is, without a doubt, language and intrigue and vocabulary that just gets us straight in. The power of read aloud, all the research tells us that students who are read to, the increase in comprehension, fluency, vocabulary, empathy, understanding of others, understanding of the world and understanding about themselves are all big byproducts of somebody bringing to them a story that they've invested time in to read for themselves and then said, do you know what, I want to read this to you. Let's start dipping into, you've got a wonderful list that you've got together here for us, and you start where you like with them, Genevieve, because I know they've all caught your eye in some way, and we'd love you to share some insights into those books with us.
Well, I might start off, I suppose we can talk a little bit about language. I think that continues comfortably. Language in the form of different languages and books. And then also I think that transitions comfortably to chatting about showing different cultures in books.
Nice.
But to begin with, there's this wonderful new book called Matt Formston, Surfing in the Dark, written by John Dixon, and it's illustrated by Southeast Queensland Philip Bunting, who does all those brilliant non-fiction and fiction books. But this book is a commercial, beautiful, engaging book that is written in English, but it's also completely written in Braille.
Oh, wow.
And it's about Matt, who when he's always loved surfing and wants to be a surfer, and when he is 5, he becomes blind. And so it's his story, which is completely told in Braille. So it's just a wonderful new opportunity, and it's really exciting as well seeing it within the publishing industry, because there have been great stories told about people with different abilities to see and not see, but to have one that's actually commercially published in Braille is astounding.
Wonderful. So a picture book, obviously, with Philip Bunting as illustrator. I know a lot of teachers are very aware of Philip Bunting's work. So wonderful collaboration there. And the reader audience?
Look, I think it would suit quite well 5 to 10. It's got quite nice language, like this first page. Matt Formston is a world champion surfer. When Matt listens, the ocean tells him things. When he touches the ocean, he feels its secret. But when he looks at the ocean, he cannot see it. Matt is almost completely blind.
Wow. And there's the language, isn't it? There's that, not just the factual, but the absolute feeling of this for us, and the understanding of what it is, almost puts us into that situation.
Certainly. It's quite a long story too, so I think it carries as a biography, even though it's a picture book.
Yes. Nice. Now, there'll be a lot of teachers that will make connections with that, and adding that to their list of examples of text that could be referred to as biographical, because that's a nice form for our students to be noticing and writing in themselves.
Certainly.
Lovely. I will just, sorry to interrupt, Genevieve, but I will just let everyone know too that all the books that you mentioned today, we will have a link in the show notes that goes directly to all of these books and on the Where the Wild Things Are website.
Yes, thank you. Any extra ones I sneak in, I can update on the list as well.
Please do. It doesn't have to be limited. So, yes, in real appreciation for, your generosity and Where the Wild Things Are, generosity of sharing so much information about these books. We love that we can connect to your website. And I'm hoping for those who don't have a local bookshop that this will be a wonderful way to tap into accessing these books and having them delivered to your school.
Definitely. We love that. And we love working with teachers and schools. And if you do reach out to us directly, we can also create a school account, which would give you 10% off your purchases.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous to know. Because when I'm working with schools, teachers will often say, I'm looking for a book. And I really love to be able to have somebody that I can recommend who they may be able to contact. So
my favorite thing is when I'm given a random abstract theme and I get to I feel like probably teacher librarians are the same, and you get to try and puzzle out the book that answers this question properly.
You're like the personalised book shopper. It's great.
Definitely,
it's great. And I will make a few connections with books today too, just like you have. I love that you've linked the book already, that it's a biographical kind of book. Teachers will often ask questions like, I'd love a book that, has to do with a global issue for this age range. I don't mind what the issue is, but, what could we use, to inform our students more about something. So you are a go-to resource there, and we really appreciate that.
This one that's come out in the last week is called NT Mob, Sharing Stories in Language. So it's this beautiful, the colours in it are fabulous. It's full of different pieces of art and paintings. It's also got maps in it. So basically it's a range of, I'd say about 10 different stories in different languages from the Northern Territory. So they're told in English and in language.
Yes.
And I recently at Brisbane Writers Festival got to listen to both readings from people reading their work in South Korean, as well as reading their work in First Nation language here. And it was just getting to hear people speak in language. And then also I think that can be just such delight in trying to speak it yourself. So I think this book offers such an amazing opportunity. I love that it combines sense of place by putting it on the map so you can see where it's from, and then tells you the story in both languages, and it's illustrated.
Oh, lovely. So some really nice features there, by the inclusion of maps.
And it also has QR codes so you can actually listen to it read properly in language.
Oh, now that's a fabulous feature. Yes, to be able to hear, if you're not able to read in language, that you can then follow along and listen to the very thing that you're reading. Beautiful.
I think this could be an amazing resource for schools.
Right. So it's a picture book?
It is. It's almost to me more like those compilation books of fairy tales or stories, because it has so many stories in it.
Yes. So is it a 32 page or is it longer?
It's 100 pages.
Ah, right.
So it's much larger, yeah.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. It's almost like an anthology then.
Yes.
There
we go.
Yes. Oh, beautiful. Oh, what a rich resource that is. So how many stories did you say?
I think it has about 10.
Right. And each are different authors.
Different authors, different translators, different places in Northern Territory. They're all very place orientated. There's two men are looking for a turtle, the Brawlger and Emu story, the grandmother and grandson.
Wow. All right. I'm glad that's on my list of ones to purchase. That sounds extraordinary. Extraordinary. And I love your connection here to when we were talking about language, that we actually talk about the craft of, how a writer puts that together, but that language comes in many different forms. So in different languages, as well as written and heard languages.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I actually had the opportunity at the Brisbane Writers Festival last week to interview and facilitate 2 sessions with Korean wordless picture book authors and illustrators. And again, it's such a wonderful opportunity. So I worked with an interpreter for that. But wordless picture books, I've seen wordless picture books before.
Yes.
But I hadn't really spent as much time poring over them. And they're a book that invites you to celebrate it as like an item and to just pore backwards and forwards. But through getting to talk to these Korean picture book creators, it just so emphasizes the fact that even though we needed an interpreter to talk, I didn't need an interpreter to read their books.
Oh my goodness, I've just had, I think like you, such a huge aha moment of the importance then of wordless picture books in classrooms where we have many languages.
Yeah, they could create such a way of connecting. Yeah,
Yes.
certainly. And also different learning abilities.
Yes. Wow. All right. That's just opened another whole door for me in thinking about. Yes.
And there's such an opportunity with them as well, because even storytelling wise,
Yes.
because some people might have read them one way and others will have read it a completely different way.
Wow. I love that. So are those picture books, are they available here?
So annoyingly, they are a little harder to get. They're available, but they are ones that you would have to do a little bit of hunting around. Like Pool, for instance, by Ji-Hyun Lee is just gone out of print.
Right.
And then the author I talked to, Ki-Hon Lee, his book is not actually available to be purchased in Australia. I have to order it from an international supplier, which of course makes the price higher. But his work is brilliant because it would translate to like high school students because it's so detailed and it's all about greed and environmental issues centered in this dramatic, detailed imagery.
Wow. I know we can't access those. They can't be added. No, that's okay. Either we make it another podcast or you might throw a couple more books onto that list for us, a couple of wordless picture books that you think might be ones that we might not be so aware of, actually. I
can have a little bit of a look. I know there's the one that everyone would be aware of course, The Boy and the Elephant by Freya Blackwood.
Yes, yes.
I'm certainly interested in discovering more myself and really, I guess, I don't know, championing that area now.
Yes, yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh, I think it's another podcast. But but pop The Boy and the Elephant up there. I think that would be, now that we've talked about, the value of that, and I think that's something that people can tap into. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. All right. What next?
I think leaning into, because we've been talking about languages, it's comfortable to talk now about some of those books that are sharing different cultures that are wonderful. So there's a brand new one that is about to come out. I think today might be pub date, and I'm excited that we'll be launching it in a couple of weeks, by Sanja Parapukaran, called Stay for Dinner. So you might know Sanja's work. She wrote The Boy Who Tried to Shrink His Name and Amasari. So her books, they're physically beautifully created. They're published by Bright Light Books, which is an imprint of Hardy Grant. And I always recommend people to keep an eye out for this imprint because I think it's doing really good things. It's focusing on sharing a whole range of great books that seem to specifically champion own voices, telling stories about different cultures from those cultures' voices.
Nice. I just noticed, so White Sunday
is
White
also
Sunday by
It's also a Bright Light book.
Yeah.
Certainly. And Lita Fuata, who wrote that, is another Brisbane author. So White Sunday is this great book about, it's a religious holiday in Samoan culture. But it's just the story of a girl who climbs a tree, falls out of it, has a good kind of adventuring day, and it's all about the feast that they share. So it shares that moment. And I've had that really great moment in schools where you've seen Samoan families see this book and just be so excited.
Yeah. And see themselves.
Yeah.
See themselves. And I love how this book starts. Talofa, my name is Sina, but my mum and dad call me Bubba. I have two big sisters, Lucy and Alofa, and two big brothers, Peter and Cosmos Jr. So already, we're right there in with their names, in with their, the very first word, Talofa.
Yeah, definitely.
We're right in there and we're part of it. Now, I've taken you away from the other book that you were talking about, Stay for Dinner.
Stay for Dinner is gorgeous because it's about this girl who eats dinner with her family, and their family eats dinner with their hands, and her grandma always does a great loud burp after dinner.
Yeah.
And she has been staying at a few friends' houses for different activities, and they've invited her to stay for dinner. And so she's found it uncomfortable working out how to eat with their utensils, but also it's made her grossly aware of, oh no, my family's different. And so it does a gorgeous thing where it shares like Italian cuisine, different types of food. It doesn't necessarily tell you where those foods are from. It just tells you what the foods are and how they're eaten. And so eventually all her friends come to her house for dinner, and they all get to eat with their hands, and it's lovely. But Sanja's language is just always so beautiful. And these illustrations are really playful. And so I think it's such a brilliant way of getting to talk about different foods and cultures in a playful, lovely way.
Yes, yes. And where some children are going to see themselves in those stories, there is also that absolute joy, I think, of being able to learn about others and their stories in this way. And that's a privilege for us, to be taken into someone else's world and learn what it's like to be there without judgment, to embrace it, to feel it, to be included in it. So they both sound like really important books for us to be bringing to our, certainly great for read alouds and that discussion then, about.
Yeah. And I'm just looking over this again, and it's just got those great moments where she realizes they're different. And initially it's not a thing of worry. She's just like, I wonder why we don't use cutlery. Papa always says the food tastes better when we eat with our hands.
Yeah.
And then she starts to think about it a little bit more. It's so simple.
I don't have that book in front of me, but White Sunday, I couldn't take my eyes off both the words and the illustrations in that. And well,
it's Mio Yim as well. I'm a big fan of her work. She's a beautiful illustrator and author who lives in Byron.
Right. Okay.
Picture book creators particularly, there's such a wide range of picture book creators in Australia.
Yes, yeah. What We Eat, is that what it's called?
A Stay for Dinner.
Sorry, Stay for Dinner. I don't know where I got that one from. Stay for Dinner, I take it, is a picture book.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and same illustrator.
The same illustrator as her other work, Michelle Pereira.
Right.
Who illustrated both Amasari and The Boy Who Tried to Shrink His Name.
Right.
And because I think The Boy Who Tried to Shrink His Name won like an illustration award when it came out as well.
Yeah, I believe it did. Yes, yeah. Now, have you got any other picture books?
I do.
Yes.
I've got two more.
two more. Beautiful.
So I thought I'd just come over to my house. This is one of the ones that's not brand new, and a lot of people are probably already aware of because it's by a bit of a powerhouse team. You will notice that it's also by Bright Light Publishing. It's by Eliza Hull and the wondrous Sally Rippon, and it's illustrated by Daniel Gray Barnett. And it is a really simple book that invites you to come over to all these different kids' houses. It's got rhyme on each page. It's beautifully illustrated as a picture book, and it shows you different kinds of families, different types of abilities, different types of like neurodiverse thinkers, and just different traits for all those things, all presented so simply and matter-of-factly. Perfect for kids who would be asking questions about different people, as kids always love to, but also just perfect for you to get to see a whole range of people and homes.
And to fully understand that's what makes our community. It makes...
Yes, you're so right.
It's not like we have to go to another country or another town or another city. Everyone is right here. Even within our classroom, we're all going to, if we're reading this in class, we're all going to be in there. And how inclusive.
See your page.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, entirely love that. And that's really geared for, any of these picture books are really suitable for the 5 to 10-year-old range,
I think so, really. Yeah, because, Come Over to My House's language is a bit simpler. Like, I think Stay for Dinner, because of how advanced its language is and its metaphors I think that's what makes it carry to the older range.
Yeah.
Come Over to My House is probably language-wise the most simplest.
Right.
I'd probably say it's more for that 5 to 8, 9, but I think you'd still be able to share it and discuss the themes within it.
Good to know. And certainly a powerhouse team on that one. That's for
Right,
sure.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There's 2 other picture books I realized. I forgot to talk about my favorite new First Nations picture book back when I was talking about First Nations.
Yes.
So if it's okay to sneak it in now.
Yes, absolutely.
The Bunyip and the Stars. The Bunyip and the Stars is this great new picture book. It's about Ingaran, which means big sister, and she is big sister, and Wambia. So these 2 kids who live together, and the little brother, Wambia, gets stolen by the Bunyip. And Ingaran goes to try and save him. And she's searching around. She's worried about getting lost, and there are no stars in the sky. And so she goes and she hunts out glowworms. She finds glowworms in a cave, and she places them in the sky for all the places she remembers about her country as a map to be able to find her way home. And then she saves her brother, and they find their way home. And it's just, I'm such a sucker for, my preference is a good narrative picture book.
Yes.
And it is just wonderful. It's so well told. It's just simple and fun. The colors in it are beautiful. It has this strong purple running throughout it. I just think it's a great text that everyone will love. Like, I'd give it to 5 and 6-year-olds, but you could easily read it older.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine anyone not loving it.
Oh, you see, I don't have that book sitting in front of me, but I can completely feel it already, about the sense of story that is there and the depth of, just by the colour palette that you've talked about, the depth of richness in country.
Yeah. And it's quite a modern kind of illustration style as well that is quite fun. I think balances really well with the story.
Oh, beautiful. So that one called again?
The Bunyip and the Stars, and I'm afraid I don't have it in front of me either, so I sold it. So I don't have the author's name or the illustrator's name in front of me. I know the author is a First Nations man.
Right. But people can easily, just with one click on the show notes, people will be able to go straight to all the listings of these books and find out. Did you have one more?
There is one more. I don't... very quickly. It's just The Garden at the End of the World. It's by Cassie Polomeni and Bryony Stewart. It's a great new picture book, came out about 2 months ago, and it's about this little girl who finds a seed, and her mother suggests that instead of planting it, why don't they take it to the seed bank in the Arctic? And so you get to go along with them. It steps you through everything. It shows you this odd seed bank that is this just room of cardboard boxes almost. But it's just a beautiful, there are so many kind of negative environmental stories coming out at the moment that put a lot of onus and kind of guilt onto children.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice to have one that is indirectly addressing it and just saying, like, look, here's a plan for the future. This is this wonderful, mysterious vault that just holds all the seeds of the world. So I love that it's giving you that positive angle.
Yes, and really opening our minds to the things that are possible in this world. That there are things like seed banks. That is such a critical part of our future, and their existence is something that I think is wonderful, to bring to our young readers and our young people.
It is, isn't it?
I'm just making a connection now to the wonder of a gentleman in America, a retired gentleman who has started collecting the seeds from apples and the varieties of apples that only seem to exist now in old rambly gardens, with singular trees that have been left there.
The rambling apple seeds.
Yes, and I just think, and maybe that's what you and I love, Genevieve, about stories, of course, and I think is what is the universal love of stories, is that we get to learn something so interesting, this learning about our world or ourselves or others is the whole point of having a story. Yeah. So very exciting. Right. So I love that one. So now we'll move across, although do you want to go the graphic novel before?
I was thinking, as I got to explore wordless picture books recently, I'm not a natural graphic novel reader. I'm a words person. I like to just get drawn through the words. So for me, reading a graphic novel, I often have to like stop and think about it a little bit. And so I felt like reading a wordless picture books was a really great introduction. If graphic novels aren't your way to do it, I think it really encourages you to almost learn how to read them. I think they're a great tool for that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good connection to make about that actually, because reading a wordless picture book requires a different way of thinking and creating.
Completely.
And so does a graphic novel. And in fact, it was only when I picked up Pebble and Wren, which I have to say, is this a new series or not?
Yeah, it's a new series.
Right. So I have to say, I'm not a big graphic novel reader, but I found this one almost, it felt more like a book in my hand than a graphic novel.
Well, it's so conversational, I think.
Yes. But when I read just the beginning of chapter 1, Genevieve, it goes like this. Somewhere in a hidden forest, there was a warm and cosy cave. Inside the cave is a little monster, but not for long. Pebble, stop stalling. It's time to go. Now, that's 4 boxes on the page. You know, it's not written in one continuous piece of text, but I could read it like that. I found myself being really drawn into this like a good novel where it kind of took me slowly into it. You know, it wasn't just a, you know.
So maybe Pebble and Wren is the book for our non-graphic novel people who are still a little bit prejudiced against them.
Yes.
And maybe this is the book to help introduce them to the format.
Yeah. Yeah. I really found that I could read it in a way that was a little bit more closely aligned to what I was used to. But it didn't take me long then to get into the backwards and forwardsing of really the dialogue between characters. You know, that it was, I can read this a little bit like I would if I was reading a novel, but yes, I'm just seeing it all in speech bubbles now rather than you know, in lines of text. So anyway, I found it a different experience reading Pebble and Wren as a graphic novel than I had with others. So that's not to say, I haven't read every graphic novel, but that's not to say that others aren't written in that way, but it was just something I noticed about it and how it's clearly delineated into chapters.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Pebble.
The other graphic novels I wanted to, I've got, so Guardians of Horsa is a brand new, so fun. And I highlighted this simply because I know teachers are always looking for new graphic novel series for their kids. And I can just not imagine like this going wrong.
Yes.
So it's basically looks a bit like a My Little Pony meets Wings of Fire.
Right.
The colors are brilliant. So I think anyone who loves the Wings of Fire graphic novels, but also for a little bit younger.
Right.
And it's about these 4 different kind of magical horses that live in 4 different nations. They're all the kids and they all get sent on this mission together. And so it introduces you to each of them. It's really funny and punchy and the colors are magnificent.
Oh, this isn't like Wings of Fire where it was a novel first?
Not that I know of.
Right.
I've only seen this.
Right. So the first in the series is out?
Yeah, it's called Legend of the Yearling.
Legend of the Yearling. See, I just love it already. Apart from your description, you know, Legend of the Yearling. I'm in. So we know we're in a legend. We know what kind of text, and isn't it wonderful to be able to bring that kind of to our younger, you know, maybe that middle primary range of reader, that we can bring that idea of legend to them. Very nice.
I just remembered the very first introduction. It's this, I don't know if I call them horses, but basically it begins with them playing and being like, you know, usually people play the floor is lava, but for us, when we play it, we jump on the lava. And it's just this really cute, like, then there's a like eruption and basically the horse gets like shot up high into the air. It's very cute.
And once again, we can never discount the rich vocabulary and imagery that graphic novels bring to us. There's in fact, sometimes I think the vocabulary is almost richer, because there's less words. Sometimes they're
more intentional.
Yes, yes.
And just that, I'm such a fan, like visual literacy is just so essential, and kids, it's so much safer and more familiar because they've been taught visual literacy through picture books and telly and everything from a much younger age. So it's such a comfortable way to make books approachable as well.
And quite accessible. Yes. Yeah. And there's a third graphic novel.
Wombats Go Camping by Maddie Frost. This is so cute. It's basically the two best friend wombats. It begins with the setup scene being, you get to see both wombats getting ready, and it'll be something simple like, oh, did you pack light? They're on the phone to each other, and, one of them's packing not much things, and the other wombat is like, yeah, I packed light, and he's got a big party light in his suitcase.
So that absolute joy of, lots of things to be inferring in there. Yes.
Yeah. And and I think kids just love wombats.
Oh, yes.
Always.
Oh, they're a fascinating creature.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about the Legends of the Yearlings. Sorry to backtrack. Is that in chapters, or is that one long?
I think it is, because it moves between the different nations of Horsa.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it is chapters.
Yes. And what about Wombats Go Camping?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
No, it's not.
Okay. And is that one for younger readers again?
I'd say again it's that middle primary.
Right.
It's a decent length. And I think the humour, it's 90 pages. I think the humour would make it carry comfortably to 10, 11-year-olds.
Right, yeah.
But it's also quite literal humour, so I think you'd be comfortable reading it younger as well.
Yeah. Nice. So that really means that we've got some good longer books there for our middle primary readers who are wanting to move into chapter books, but I'm not lessening, what we need to do as readers in graphic novels. But sometimes, as you say, that nice connection, the visual, moving from picture books through to graphic novels. And graphic novels, exactly what they are, they're novels. So they're much longer texts and should be part of every child's experience and reading diet, and how they work as texts. So
Definitely.
3 really, and Pebble and Wren, I'd say that would be a middle primary one too.
Yeah,
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah. Right, so 3 great recommendations there on graphic novels. Now on to the novel collection that you've got. I'm pretty excited about these as well. I'm excited about all of them. I've got, and I'm sitting here, as I told Genevieve before the podcast, I bought 8 of these books yesterday. Anything that Genevieve's mentioned that I haven't got yet, I'll be ordering. And I've already had a feast of reading last night that has so sustained me, just as a human being. To be reading children's books is so good as an adult.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
I think, what I said before, they're just so much of the time the storytelling. There's a sense of wonder in the storytelling that I think grown-ups seem to think they don't need to use in their books. And that wonder is just brings delight to reading. And I think that's what adults can get from reading children's books.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't ever feel it's a hard job, to read children's books for our profession. It's
No.
I think it's a complete joy. So where do you want to start with the novels now?
I think I might flag, just because I think it's for a similar age group as we were just discussing, Harriet Hound by Kate Foster. So Kate Foster has written a couple of books, and you would know her because she definitely focuses on showing characters from different walks of life. So she's neurodiverse, and in her first book, The Bravest Word, that's her second book. In her first book, Pause, it's about an autistic boy who loves dogs, much like Kate, who wants to try and make friends and is like, if I win the local dog show, I will make friends. And so that's where he's going. So her third book that's just come out, Harriet Hound, is actually for a younger audience than her other books.
Right.
It is more for, I'd say, grade 1 to 3. It's shorter chapters. It has illustrations by the wonderful Sophie Beer. It's full of lists. The text has large text in it to break things up on each page. And so I'll just read you the first page simply because I think it explains itself very easily.
Yes.
Very simple, straightforward language. Nice to meet you. My name is Harriet Hound. Here are some important facts about me. I'm 8 years old. I'm autistic. I live in a town called Labrador. I'm vegan. My favorite number is 8. Favorite color is brown. Favorite letter is H. I have short curly hair. And here is even more important information.
I love it.
Yeah, and so I think Kate just does a gorgeous job of being quite matter of fact and having fun adventures. So Harriet Hound is a secret superhero, and she has so many dogs. So it's just a gorgeous, friendly book for everyone.
And she lives in Labrador.
Yes.
Nice. I love how it's just very matter of fact, but you make a list of yourself, and each of us making our list of ourselves, it sounds like we are just wonderful. And I think that's what, isn't it? You know, it's like we are all, you know, what this is me, and we are all just might be ordinary, but she has got superpowers.
Yeah.
Which we don't know yet. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So that's Harriet Hound
by Kate Foster and illustrated by Sophie Beer.
Looking forward to reading that one. And I love talking about, you know, the different features within the text too, that there's lists, use of space, and is this a chapter book?
Yes, it is.
Nice. So for those young readers, so from, you know, year 1 to year 3, but would also make a great read aloud.
Yeah, it really would.
Oh, beautiful.
And the quite short chapters, I'm just having a flick through, kind of those. There are some longer ones.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what I hadn't realised? It's 3 different stories within the same book, and each story has different chapters.
Oh.
Has lots of short chapters in it.
Oh, lovely. Okay.
Also has a fact sheet in there, which, like in the middle of the book, it's one that the main character has made for herself.
Oh, you see, I find all of those features just wonderful ways of engaging readers and seeing the potential for them as writers, thinking, oh my goodness, they're the kinds of things I can include in my writing, you know, that it's not just, you know, a story is a story is a story. You know, a story, it can have chapters, it can have other things added in like lists or fact sheets or still within story, you know, that those features go across all types of writing. So, and of course illustrated, which, you know, we wanted young writers to know too how important their illustrations are still in the writing that they do.
Oh, yeah, and how they add to the story.
Yes, yep, for information and enjoyment. Now, I noticed that in Leave Her at Last, the book by the author you entirely love, Sarah Pennypacker. I notice in this book, so I started reading it, Lever Thornblossom flew outside the instant she heard the Nutsmore Weekly thunk against the door. Fetching the newspaper was the only time her parents permitted her in the front yard.
So much in that paragraph.
Isn't there? Like, what is going on here? It's the only time she's allowed in her front yard. Very interesting. And all those lovely, and chapter 1 at first. But what I find fascinating about this book is there's 54 chapters.
Oh, wow.
And each chapter is probably about 4 pages long. Oh no, some of them are a bit longer than that, but they're those lovely shortish chapters that when I'm new to chapter books, it gives me time to get that chapter and get the next lot of information to hold on to for the next chapter. It's still quite long. It's 300 and something pages long, but I can see our younger readers really being able to get into that one.
Yeah. Well, I'd say even with Sarah Pennypacker, so I haven't got to read Leave Her at Last yet. It came out last week.
Oh, wow.
But with Sarah Pennypacker, she's one of those authors, I'd say much like, say, Kimberly Brubaker Bradley or even Lauren Wolk, who her books are very much emotional journeys as much as she always has physical adventures.
Yes.
But she has a real, like, her characters change and discover a lot about themselves. Yeah. So people would know her work from, she wrote Pax, which has been quite popular. Yeah. And then Here in the Real World, which was a wonderful story about a creative boy discovering his worth. But I think because of her, like, that emotional depth of her books, even like older readers, say like 13-year-olds who aren't really comfortable reading, could still read her work and I think get a lot from it if they're willing to. I guess this is a more childish cover than, say, Pax. And those short chapters would help those readers that aren't.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of like Tristan Banks, I guess. Like, I think you can read it way older than the reading level is.
Great. Because, it is a long book. It's big. And when I read the blurb, and this is very much Sarah Pennypacker, but on the blurb, what are people for? Like, what? How's that? Yeah. What are people for? That's the burning question on the mind of Lever Space Thornblossom. Fame, says Lever's mum, the mayor of Nutsmore. Money, says her dad, the town treasurer. And with the help of an orphaned badger, a risk-averse boy in a hazmat suit, and the town's librarians, Lever sets off to discover her own answer, setting off a chain of events that will change Nutsmore forever. And I think that's the one question that I often present to teachers as well, to get them thinking about this and therefore then get their children thinking about this when we're reading, is what is this story really about? Mm. And Sarah Pennypacker's always got big things that stories are about. She? Yeah. What are people really for?
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah. Fabulous read. As I said, started a few chapters of that last night and can't wait to keep reading because I'm already off adventuring with Lever and loving it.
Another book that does that, like, ask big questions, but definitely I think has so much conversation potential for a class or for people, is October.
Oh, yes.
By Katja Ballen. So this won the Carnegie last year. So it's the one that's a little bit older, but I just did it with my book club. One of my coworkers also just read it with her daughter. It's a bit of a tearjerker, admittedly.
Yeah.
But it's it's a book that you can't, like, it's quite hard to explain, and because not much happens really. So it's a girl who lives in the woods with her father. She loves it out there. And sometimes the woman who calls herself her mother tries to visit, and October refuses to see her. And one year her father has an accident and she has to go live with the woman who calls herself her mother. It's like a book of belonging, basically, because her mum left because she just didn't belong living off the grid. It just wasn't right for her. Didn't mean she didn't love her dad, didn't mean she didn't love October. But, like, October and her dad do belong there. And so it puts October in the scenario where she has to go and live with her mum. And she is harsh on the woman. It's such a gentle walkthrough of realization without, like, it completely leaves you have to infer it. Mm-hmm. But it's brilliant. It's one that I loved more than the book club kids loved. Right. So I think it's a little bit of that case that I think would make a beautiful, say, read aloud privately as well, like getting to read one-on-one, because I think there's a lot of reflection that could come from conversation around it and talking through why that moment was important or interesting.
Yeah.
That I think perhaps kids may not take in without some support. And of course I had one random 10-year-old boy who gave it 10 out of 10 and adored it. But it's magic.
I'm so interested by its layout in that it's broken into what we would say chapters, but there are no chapter headings or numberings, but it's broken up. And then it also has these sections of, well, they're in italics. It's kind of like free verse.
Well, it's very internal. You may notice there's no dialogue. It's because it's the dialogue is said in italics.
Right. Okay.
So October is very creative. And so she finds all these treasures all the time, and she kind of weaves stories out of them. Like as soon as she finds something, this whole story will burst forth that you get to read. But the way that Callen has communicated this is by doing it completely internally. So you're very in her head.
Wow, I see.
So it'd be a really cool storytelling tool.
Yes.
Like if you're teaching storytelling, like you could do definitely activities around finding treasures and using them to create stories.
Wow. And you said it is quite, you can get quite emotional reading.
It's kind of beautifully emotional.
Yes.
Like it's rather than like
distressingly emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found the beginning of the story beautiful but sad. And it starts, we find the owl at the very edge of our woods the morning after the storm, wind blasted and wings flight frozen and round eyes glassy. I touch its feathers lightly with my fingertip, and I'm surprised because they still feel real, even though the owl has slipped away somewhere else and Dad is already digging a hole for it in the rain-soaked earth. Love the language of it. Love the use of, the wings, flight frozen.
Isn't it brilliant? And
Yes.
But then also just like and Dad is digging a hole.
Yeah.
And then the simple frankness of life.
Yes, and that's it. It needs to be buried, and the fact that it's being honoured with a burial rather than just left. So no, I agree. I can't wait to, once again, I just started the first few chapters of that last night and can't wait to read through that one. Even the cover itself just drew me in with that owl featuring.
It is probably, again, a little bit more of a grown-up's cover.
Yes,
But I think it could be a really useful book to talk through.
Yeah.
And for the grown-ups to enjoy and relish.
Yes, and for that reason, it's probably, I will reserve my judgment until I finish reading it, but it makes me think that's the very kind of book I may want to have as a read aloud, even to a whole class.
Yeah.
To be able to just bring such a big thought and such a big story to everyone and to let them experience it in their way.
Yeah, and I think as well, by reading something like this, you're saying the story matters.
Yes.
And this type of storytelling matters.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. What have we still got?
Well, I have a nice segue, actually. So another thing that happens in October is that they go mudlarking. And so, again, that idea I was saying of finding treasures. And so I just wanted to mention Pamela Rushby's new book, Mud Puddlers, just simply in that the funness of mudlarking, I think, is something you could really dwell on. And so Mud Puddlers has a really strong sense of place, and so does October.
Yes.
Astounding sense of place.
Yeah.
But Mud Puddlers is about an Australian girl who moves to London to stay with her aunt. Also has a currently complicated relationship with her parents.
Yeah.
They've gone to Antarctica or something as scientists. And her aunt is a mudlarker. So I think Pamela Rushby, always delivers with playful writing, strong historical references. I think there's always a lot to use her books for in the classroom.
Yeah. There's a lot of references made to time and place that are really
definitely
good. So we wouldn't call this historical fiction. It brings to us the sense that finding out a little bit more about what things were like at that time will help us understand more of the intricacies of the story.
Definitely. You know what? You've just done a perfect segue for my next book, actually. Ooh. Miss Mary Kate Martin's Guide to Monsters. You may notice that I pick a lot of Southeast Queensland authors, but this is by Karen Foxley. This girl who has gone with her archaeologist mother to the small town, and there seems to perhaps be a worm, the Wollington worm, which is a giant dragon-like-ish worm that lives underground, apparently, terrorizing the town. But there's all these references throughout history of when the worm's been there. And so she goes out and she like looks at old newspapers and does all this research, and it has all these great references to history. And she like debunks some of the myths that have been told about it. Like they're like, the worm ate 6 children. And she actually goes and finds their headstones. And on it says they died of an old sickness. And she's like, why does it do that? And then she goes and finds a newspaper article which like proves that was correct. So it has great kind of historical centering in it.
So it certainly does have that historical centering, but it is more fantasy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I mean, it is. Yeah, there's a magic worm in there.
Yes.
But it's very like practical, and like it's, you know, she has her sparkle pens that she has determinedly not opened, and now she's like, no, now is the right moment. I feel comfortable opening them. And so she writes with her gel pens, and everything's color coded. And she and her mum don't have mobile service out there, but they have mobiles. So it is fantasy, but it's almost like the only fantastical element is this supernatural random worm that we don't really talk about the fact that it's magic. It's just that it's more like English folklore vibes.
Okay. So, right, that is such an interesting mix, isn't it? It's almost a bit hybridish in its way of being. And you know
very Karen Foxley.
You know what threw me is that there is a map at the beginning, and I immediately went into a bit of fantasy looking at the map. But actually, everything about that map, there's no fantastical names there. It is a map of a town.
Yeah.
It's the village green and the cemetery.
But you're like, yeah, a map is a key that this is a fantasy story.
Yes. And I should have not been fooled by that, being, as I was as a child, a huge Millie Molly Mandy fan. Mm-hmm. And, of course, there was the map of the village at the beginning of every one of those books, and that wasn't fantasy.
Yeah,
and neither is this. It was just little everyday adventures of Millie Molly Mandy.
Okay.
But here we are, the map of Woolington Well isn't fantasy at all. It's the village of.
Yes, there is a little bit of fantasy, like fairly key. I just mean that there's other elements that are very prominent as well.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. Just other making cool me stuff. More intrigued now to read it.
She's quite an anxious first character, and there's this gorgeous line that's used throughout it that she's quoting her mother back to herself, and I think it is, beginnings and endings you're not good at, but you're very good at in-betweens, Mary Kate. And there's all these rituals she has for herself, so I think there's a beautiful potential for kids to see, like kids that worry, to feel seen and safe in this book. And also for other kids to get to understand them. And format-wise, we were discussing, like before, it has some illustrations, but it also has like some newspaper clippings, it has some notes, and it also has extracts from a book called P.K. Mabry's Complete Guide to Monsters of the Northern Hemisphere. And it has little quotes like scattered throughout them, almost like segments of it, kind of begins the different segments of the book.
Nice. Now, readership on this one
this one's quite young.
Yeah.
So the story's told very straightforwardly. Everything's explained pretty clearly. I'd say probably perfect for 8 and 9.
Yeah.
10 and 11 would be happy reading it probably, but it is kind of simple. Oh, the one other thing that's cool in it as well is questions. She always writes down questions about everything. And I think after it, I was kind of anxious the day I was reading it. And then I started writing myself out all these questions. And it was very inspiring.
I really love the connections that you make, to how children, like what this can bring for children, that we can do the very same thing as characters do. If we're feeling this, the way they get through something is to do that. And that, these often bring strategies for ourselves.
Yeah,
when
you can bring stories into your life.
Yes, yeah. So the Wrath of the Woolington Worm, we would say 8, 9, 10-year-olds.
Yeah, I reckon 9's who it's for.
Yeah.
And then it has some move room around that.
Yeah,
and the second one's out as well.
Oh, right. Ooh, good to know. So that series is called Miss Mary Kate Martin's Guide to Monsters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think a book that has a good parallel and is for the exact same readership is Sue Whiting's popular series, Pearly and Pig.
Oh, yes.
It's also about a little girl who comes from a family of adventurers. She's an adventurologist and she's quite anxious.
I'd like that word, adventurologist.
I know, it's fun, hey?
Yes. Just to reference back to the Mud Puddlers, we'd put the readership of that one maybe a little bit older though.
I'd say more like 10 to 12.
10 to 12, yeah. Beautiful.
Which I'd say is Pamela Rushby's primary audience usually.
Yes, yeah. How are we going here, Genevieve? Are we up to Whalesong?
Yeah, I think we could even finish on Whalesong if we liked.
Yeah. Opening up this book and reading from the beginning, the language had me straight away. Aberdeen Knopwood sat on the edge of Constitution Dock, her legs dangling off the edge. The autumn sunlight turned the water to molten gold. The breeze on her cheeks was honey warm. She turned her face to the sky, to the clouds, and hummed a song of summer. Like, I'm in. As soon as I read that beginning, I'm in. I'm with Aberdeen. I want to go with her. She's so interesting.
Yeah.
She hums songs of summer and sees that the water, or, that the breeze on her cheeks is honey warm. They're the kinds of things where I go, yeah, I want to hang out with Aberdeen.
Be my friend, please.
Yes. So tell us a bit more about Whalesong.
Look, it's an interesting book, and it's one that I think has so much to talk about. So Aberdeen is herself quite, I guess, feeling that guilt that I was mentioning, I think is put upon the current generation and the fear of the environment, and she's very worried about it. But specifically, she's worried about whales. It's set in Tasmania. Kate Gooden is a Tasmanian author, and basically it's a time slip, and she ends up getting taken using an item or an amulet almost.
Oh, yes.
She gets taken back in time with this little girl who ends up being her ancestor. And they go about changing history around the whales. Her best friend is a First Nations girl who's gone away on an adventure. And so it talks about, I guess, her awareness of the land, but from both her her best friend's First Nations perspective and her own.
Right.
And she's someone who is really angry. She wants to change things, but that's not also who she is. She's a quiet, unassuming girl. And so for her, discovering how she can make change is important. It's not a perfect book. Parts of it are a little didactic, but I think also it's writing in a realm that there isn't much written in, so perhaps it has to be.
Yeah.
But it also has an adventure. It has a time slip. It has two wonderful characters knitted together and a gorgeous friendship that starts between them. It has some mean historical men. What's his name? Kelly, I think, who was a key person who's somewhat revered and somewhat frowned upon in Tasmanian history.
Right. Yes, because there's quite strong connections, aren't there, to the I've just found the word, the antique chronometer.
That's what helps her find her place in time.
Yes. I see there's also, quite a bit of, is it only John Donne that's being quoted, or are there quite a lot of
There's
poems?
Quite a lot of poetry throughout it, actually. Yeah. And it's referenced at the end what the poems are if they're not told.
Right. Because sometimes a whole chapter will be, I see chapter 10 is...
They're like sea shanties, Tasmanian sea shanties in it, other poets.
Wow.
And it also, it kind of like one of them, I remember it referencing saying like, I don't really understand the poem, but I somehow feel it through the cadence of the words. So it's also giving you a little bit of those ideas of how to read poetry as well.
Yes. And I notice there's also quite a bit of, is it like inner monologue that's written in italics at times? Because I see, I'm just looking at a page here, she was silent. after she said all of that, and Betty was silent too, and they watched the whales, and it felt as if the whales watched them too, and Aberdeen thought to herself, and then this is in italics, you did nothing. You only told a story. What use is that? So is that used a bit like, I can't remember which other book we were talking about where italics were used for?
Well, in October, the dialogue is shown through italics. Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's quite as formalized in this. I think a lot of it's almost her responses to herself.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think that.
Or emphasis.
Yes. And I think that's what makes this book, so intriguing, is that the use of italics here and how we read that. Sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's not. But what are the italics referencing? What are they asking us to do as the reader? What is it that they're asking us to notice? So,
yeah.
I've started all of these books because I thought I need to at least have got into them a little bit. Nothing like starting 7 books, over 2 nights and reading little bits of them. But there isn't one of them that I don't want to finish. They've all got me there. They've all got me wanting to know more, wanting to see how this plays out and what will I understand from reading this book.
I think that's just because they all have strong senses of place and really strong characters.
So, Genevieve, thank you so much for the insights you've brought to, I don't know how many books we've looked at today, maybe we talked about 16 or so books, quite possibly. And I think that's just an extraordinary gift to not only be brought the books as titles, but then to have some insight into it. I think the one thing I did want to make sure that I did say was, to really suggest to everyone that go buy yourself a book from that list, that it's really, that's a
Enjoy
gift.
them for yourself.
Yes, enjoy them for yourself. And I think by presenting the list that you have, it's a diverse list in the types of texts that they are. But I think because of the range of texts that are being written now from so many different perspectives and in so many different formats, that the more we read those, the more we can open our own students' eyes into how to read those books. It isn't just always a straight out, oh, we've got something in italics.
Yeah, how
or we've
to support that.
Yeah. How do books work? How do writers work to create effect with the features and the use of language and the use of, text features like italics? I'm picking on that one in particular because that's one thing, even just working with a child the other day, they didn't pay attention to the italic until I said, wonder why the author did that. Why did the author put that word in italics? And it wasn't until we really explored that we discovered it was for a reason, and it not only meant that it changed the way we read it, but it absolutely changed what we understood. So I think all of those books, can really, the more we as readers experience all those different types of things that authors are using in writing, the more we can think about that as we're reading. And I guess what I'm, in a very, very long-winded way, am saying too is we need to read the books before we share them. It's good to be able to know what it is about how a book works, not so that we can reveal things ahead of time, but to be able to guide our listeners through the story, to be able to read it in a way that brings forth all the things that the author intended through their writing. So I really hope that people can, they can go shopping, go buy a book, read it, enjoy it, and then share it in a read aloud, because it will be an entirely different experience in sharing it, especially with a bit of insight like you've brought to us today, Genevieve, into what those books are about and that little bit of information about authors and the way they work. And I absolutely love that you bring us lots of southeastern Queensland authors because we are richly blessed here in Australia, aren't we, with such a wealth of writers who bring
beautiful
information to our
books that we're
students.
getting.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for joining us today. We've loved to see that so many of you have subscribed to our episodes from all corners of the world. The Teacher's Toolkit podcast is also about giving you an insider's guide to top teaching ideas, tools, techniques in literacy teaching and learning. Please subscribe to our weekly newsletter via the website. You'll receive advance notice on blogs, podcasts, events and ways to contact us. Thank you so much, Genevieve, for joining us today and bringing us all of these books and opening our world to a whole range of new releases. So,
not at all. Thank you.
So thank you so much, and we'll make sure that in the show notes will be the link to all of those books that Genevieve has talked about. So thanks, Genevieve, and thanks to all our listeners. All the best to everyone. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. To make sure you don't miss any literacy learning tips and insights, please subscribe to our show on your favourite podcast player. At Q Learning, our literacy specialists draw on over 30 years of teaching and international consulting experience to deliver world-class learning solutions. We equip, empower and support teachers to become their authentic selves. To find out about upcoming webinars and about how Q can help you and your school, visit qlearning.com.au. And you can get even more amazing teaching resources right now at teachific.com.au. Stay tuned.